The Torah says that Hashem has a hand, but isn't this just a metaphor? The Torah also says that Hashem loves us, but how can he have an imperfect human emotion? And what has this got to do with our relationship with him? If you think you really love, and Hashem doesn't, you've got it backwards. We are the metaphor. Even we have an essence. He is a someone, not a something. The difference between us and Hashem is not that we can love and he cannot. It's that his love is infinitely more real, more essential, more true than ours, because our love is a mashal for his. Who you are, the real, deep, essential you, is unchanging. No matter what you do, no matter what you feel, if we can truly desire, know, and love, so can Hashem, right? This is not the difference between us. In this video series, my goal is to release your mind and soul to be able to freely think about Hashem in the way the Torah talks about him. Rabbi held that awareness of God's personality is far more vital than philosophical speculation about what may or may not be said of God. In this video series, which is a follow-up from my previous video on the same topic, we're going to be talking about something very personal, our relationship with Hashem and how it works, Hashem himself. We know the Torah is full of descriptions of him, his hand, his love, his wisdom, and his will, and they're very, very important. But how do we understand them? What do they really mean, and what do they not mean? We're going to go really into the lumdus and the sources on this and get it right. Now, starting off, there are some very deep truths about Hashem that are the ikarim of our emunah, that he is one, that he is perfect, that he is ineffable, and that he is unchanging, that seem hard to reconcile with all of this. Now, not only are these fundamentals of our emunah, but they're also very deep, sophisticated philosophical statements. As such, comprehending them is usually left to the advanced thinkers, while most people are taught to accept these as truths with emunah, without probing too deeply or trying to understand them. As the Rambam says in Mar Nevuchim, part 1, chapter 35, where he emphasizes that most people should be taught basically how absolutely different and beyond comprehension Hashem is, and how he cannot be affected or changed, and saying otherwise would imply that he is not one. Therefore, we have come to teach the most basic explanation. Every description of Hashem is an anthropomorphism, which is a device for humans to use to help us in our service and connection, but it's not really true at all. And actually, thinking it true is heretical. This has had an adverse side effect. I'll put it in the words of Harav Shimshon and Raphael Hirsch when describing what it means for Hashem to regret creating us after seeing our wickedness. Regarding these and similar anthropomorphic expressions used about God, we allow ourselves a general observation. People have philosophized so long about these expressions in an effort to remove any notion of physicality that they have come dangerously close to dissolving the very personhood of God. Now, this is absolutely spot on. In order to avoid anthropomorphizing Hashem, and therefore being heretical, many well-meaning, sincere Ovdei Hashem, in their effort to avoid error, have ended up placing Hashem in a kind of unreachable mystery box, where he is thought of as entirely beyond feeling or relationship, practically deleting him from being real in their minds altogether. Chaval, chaval, chaval. Rav Hirsch continues, if that had been the Torah's intent, he could have easily avoided such expressions. But in fact, the greater danger lies in denying God's personality than in misreading these expressions as physical descriptions. These anthropomorphic terms safeguard two of the most essential ideas, the freedom of God and the freedom of man. It is no accident that the Torah says when God saw, human wickedness was not inevitable. God had to see it. His knowledge was not automatic. This assures us of human free will, and the fate that befalls man does not result from blind natural causality. Rather, it comes through God's deliberation, and that deliberation itself causes pain to the one who makes the decision. All of this presumes divine personality and freedom, and preserves these ideas in our consciousness. Already, Ra'avad, one of our deepest Jewish thinkers, held that awareness of God's personality is far more vital than philosophical speculation about what may or may not be said of God. End quote. Sadly, the result today is that almost every book, every share, every class, whenever Hashem is mentioned, we instinctively insert a preamble that undoes whatever we are about to say. When we say Hashem regrets, we immediately say, but of course Hashem doesn't regret anything. This is just a mashal. When we say he loves or is angry at us, we say kivyachol, so to speak. That's obviously just a human term. It doesn't really mean Hashem has emotions. Whenever we tell a bar mitzvah boy how important it is to put on tefillin, we hurriedly add, but of course Hashem doesn't need you to put on tefillin. It doesn't do anything for him. It's all just for your benefit. And when we tell someone to daven sincerely, we say, but of course Hashem doesn't really need your prayers or change his response. It's all just for your own spiritual growth. As you can see, Rav Hirsch and the Rabbi quotes in Hilchot Teshuvah and many other Gedolim were deeply against this, saying that it has resulted in a situation than the one that we started out trying to avoid, and the results are deeply damaging. By removing the sense of Hashem's personhood, we've ended up depersonalizing him entirely, chas v'shalom. Misconceptions are rife. We think he doesn't really need us, that he doesn't really care about us or feel for us. The Torah says otherwise, and these great Rabbanim, such as Rav Hirsch and the Ravad, and others, all confirm that this is because they are true, and it's vital for us to know this. The Rambam himself says that the terms of description Hashem uses in his Torah are true, homonyms pointing to a higher reality, even though they are not actually part of his essence. The Kuzari explains how important it is to not over-philosophize about Hashem, and that prophetic imagery is necessary for us to connect to him. Rav Albo also takes a position in Sefer Ikarim 222, emphasizing how we shouldn't confuse the fact that positive descriptions are his actions, but that does not detract from their truth or the impact that these descriptions should have in our relationship with Hashem, when we know that he loves us and he cares about us. In fact, understanding them and utilizing them is essential. He showed how Chazal took Hashem's descriptions very carefully and very seriously. Chazal forced us to refer to them in our prayers. I mean, after all, don't we say Hashem loves us twice a day with Shemu Malchut? Even the Vilna Gaon warns about this, taking it even to Midrashim, saying that we shouldn't relegate them to mere stories and puzzles. The Rambam, when understood deeply and on his own terms, does not deny that Hashem truly knows and wills. He simply refuses to describe these qualities in a way that implies limitation or composition, but that's all. Later thinkers often push this negative theology too far, beyond what even the Rambam intended. Misconceptions are now widespread. We begin to think that Hashem doesn't really need us, that he doesn't truly care about us or feel for us. But the Torah itself speaks otherwise, and these Rabbanim, including Rav Hirsch, the Ravad, Rambam, and definitely the Kabbalistic tradition, affirm that these descriptions of Hashem are true in the deepest sense. It is vital that we understand this and we get it right. But again, we come back to the original issues that brought us here in the first place. How can these statements be true, like Rav Hirsch says, if they seemingly contradict these theological truths that are the foundations of our faith, that he is one, perfect, ineffable, and never changes? So stay tuned for the next episode, because there we are going to bring some direct quotes from some absolutely fantastic, high-caliber sources, backing up the notion that, while the actions, descriptions, and attributes in the Torah may be unlike anything that we can grasp, they are nonetheless not empty metaphors, but divine truths, a divine Nimshal for a very deep truth, and we will explain that as we go along. Previously, we saw that all of Hashem's descriptions, like his hand, his love, his regret, and his actions, are described in the Torah, but they have been unfortunately reduced to empty metaphors in the public consciousness. And we brought many reasons to question this and statements of Rabbanim polemicizing against this. In this episode, we're going to begin resolving this contradiction by understanding how the philosophers and the Mekubalim really explain what the Torah means when it speaks about Hashem's hand, eye, heart, and actions, etc. In this video series, my goal is to release your mind and soul to be able to freely think about Hashem in the way the Torah talks about him. In this video, I'm going to be doing so with no innovations of my own. In fact, I come from a yeshivish background myself, and I thought exactly the same as what I've explained above in the previous video. I was well convinced, I understand the argument very well. And I only came to change my opinion after a lot of serious study of the sources I'm going to bring now. So, none of this is my own innovation. I'm going to be quoting and explaining high caliber sources which provide very complete explanations and ties together all the opinions and accounts for all the issues, and shows you how these notions that Hashem knows you, deliberates you in your actions and your choices, loves you vulnerably and infinitely, that he needs you, that he desires you like a father desires his son and needs him to be good and successful and be well, and as a husband needs his wife, are indeed the deepest of the deep truths of all reality of Hashem himself. We will explain that these attributes are truly godly, even as his essence remains transcendent and unchanged by them. But we will also explain how this connection between attributes and essence is also true of our own essence and attributes, and thus these teachings were never meant to be understood as implying that Hashem's feelings for us were in any way less or not real for Kurt. So to begin, let's return to those sources that I quoted in the original video I made 6 months ago on this topic. All of these sources deal with the Torah's descriptions of Hashem, his hand, his eye, his will, his knowledge. I first quoted the Rambam himself, who explains that these terms are not meant to be understood in a physical sense, but point to a higher truth. He has several dozen chapters dedicated to giving examples on how this works. Then I quoted the Shaarei Orah, the Shalah and the Tzedek, Mekubalim, who teach that these descriptions reflect deep essential truths about Hashem, with our physical versions being distant metaphors of him. So, let's start with the Rambam. The Rambam has dozens of chapters in part 1 of the Orah, where he gives a little bit of an understanding of higher conceptualizations of these terms that lead us towards a closer understanding of what they truly mean when applied to Hashem. For example, physical sight. It's an appropriate and meaningful metaphor for a higher form of sight, namely intellectual sight, the mind's eye, comprehension itself. This shows us that the Torah's use of such terms points us upwards, not downwards, towards deeper truths about Hashem. He calls them homonyms. Now, the Shaarei Orah next. It's an early Kabbalistic work by a Rishon. In it, he explains, quote, hand, foot or ear, etc. point to Hashem's greatness and truth. Yes, we are made in his image and likeness, but don't get into your head that the Torah means that it is actually an eye in the form of an eye, like a physical eye, or a hand in an actual form of a hand. Rather, these concepts are the deepest of the deep truths about the existence of Hashem, may he be blessed, from which come the source and influence to all that exists according to Hashem's decree, may he be blessed. However, the very existence of that hand is not what this hand is. Their form is not alike. End quote. So again, the emphasis is not that Hashem does not have a hand, but rather he has the real hand, whatever it is, and that is a deep truth. Our hand is the metaphor, but it is a metaphor that directly descends from the divine hand, as he goes on to explain in the next paragraph. See there. Now, the Shalah, a Musa work, explains this even more clearly, saying, quote, all the attributes mentioned with respect to Hashem, may he be blessed, such as eye, ear, leg, hand, and so on, as well as the concepts of union, embrace, kiss, father and mother, son and daughter, father-in-law and mother-in-law, and many such terms. All of these are holy language, their intrinsic names in holiness. Later, through the process of descent, they become borrowed terms, to the point where even physical entities are called by these names as borrowed terms. So again, note, no physicality is being attributed to Hashem, chas v'shalom, yet certainly these are not empty phrases either, chas v'shalom. Let's continue to understand what we do with all this, but first, just pause and reflect. Have you heard of these sources before? Have you ever seen them? Do they not sound heretical to you if you didn't know that they were from such great Rabbanim that certainly were not heretics? Many people are completely unaware of these sources. Those whom Rav Hirsch was polemicizing against felt that these sources were not meant for the masses, right? But that is far from the only approach among Gedolim. The Shalah himself disagrees, and that's part of the reason why he insisted that his work be called a Musa work in the introduction, rather than a Kabbalistic work. He didn't want it to be hidden from everyone. And the Nefesh HaChaim, another deeply Kabbalistic work, was also published with that same intent. Rav Chaim Volozhin instructed on his deathbed, as reported by his son in the introduction, that the work should not be censored or hidden, but taught openly to all, completely, all of it. This was also the opinion of the Zohar, the Ramak, the Orah Chama, the Baal Shem Tov, the Vilna Gaon, Rav Kook, the Baal Sulam, the Ishbitzer Rebbeim. The list is extensive. Chabad, of course, they took it even further. They made it their mission and goal to undo the damage of everything that has happened to depersonalize Hashem by explaining everything. So therefore, I quoted the strongest quote of all in the last video, specifically where he says, quote, "And the Torah's descriptions of Hashem may be explained by the simple meaning of what is written," end quote. I chose this quote because it states exactly the goal of this video, which is enabling you, by permission of a great Tzedek with Ruach HaKodesh, to free your mind and heart from its shackles that prevent you from contemplating Hashem and getting to know Him and feeling for Him and believing that He truly feels for you too. You have permission to say, yes, He does love me. Yes, I do upset Him when I sin. And yes, I do matter to Him, Himself at the highest level and His truest core. As the Rabbi Rashab puts it in Kol HaMitzvot, right at the end, he says, quote, "My entire intent in teaching this was to convey this idea, that everything affects Hashem in His essential self. When one understands with whom they are dealing, they develop a completely different type and kind of respect and reverence," end quote. Note how the Tzedek doesn't say physical meaning. You can take the Torah in its simple meaning, not its physical meaning. He says simple meaning because, of course, nobody is saying that Hashem is physical, but he wants you to know that it's true. In whatever reality and existence it is true. It's, like we said, the real truth. We are the metaphor. This video is certainly not here to go against the 13 Ikarim, which state emphatically that Hashem is not physical. Even Ra'avad was not saying this. Rather, when we describe Hashem, we have to know that the words we are using are simply and actually true. It's just that their truth is higher than the reality that we know. Like the example above on the difference between physical sight and intellectual sight brought by the Rambam, but to the infinite degree, much more lofty than even that. If you think that this disagrees with the Rambam, well, I want to point out something surprising. I agree with you. The Tzedek agrees with you. But the surprise is, though, that only a few pages previously in the very same piece, the Tzedek explains that the Kabbalists, like himself, like the Maharal, all of them really, felt that the Rambam didn't go far enough in protecting the essential unity and ineffability and perfection of Hashem's essence. The Rambam said that He's the knower, the known, and the knowledge all in one, and that's already a limit on Hashem's essence, and they said that is not far enough. They took it further. So therefore, you should be startled. This is the proof that if the Kabbalists are saying that Hashem's expressions are real and true, then surely that's proof that Hashem feeling for us and His essence being one and unchanging and unaffectable are not contradictions, and we will learn why throughout this series, so stay tuned. So far, we've learned that the Torah's descriptions of Hashem, His hand, His love, His regret, are not poetic devices or educational symbols. They are the ultimate truths. Nonetheless, they are not part of Hashem's essence. In the next episode, we're going to begin to explain the difference between Hashem's essence and His expressions by understanding the concept of metaphor and the analog of a metaphor, otherwise known as the Nimshal to the Mashal. We are then going to compare these to our own moral reality, and thus we're going to understand what, so to speak, kaviyachol really means. Stay tuned. In the last episode, we discussed how the descriptions of Hashem are meaningful. There is a deep truth behind them, and that doesn't even contradict the Rambam. In fact, the Kabbalists say that Rambam did not go far enough in protecting Hashem's essence, yet they hold that the descriptions have a truth to them. And we showed even the Rambam calls them actions. Now, we're going to discuss in this episode what actions are and what essence is, what the difference is between them, and what is the connection between them, and how understanding this in both ourselves and with regards to Hashem will unlock everything. As you can see, we're getting higher now, so let's pause and catch up on everything we are discussing, because it can get quite confusing. Let's lay it out in the same way that the Rambam does, and we'll avoid ourselves getting lost in all the philosophy. So the Rambam splits it up like this. 1. Hashem Himself is one, and He calls Hashem Himself a pure essence. And it is that essence that the theological statements of perfection, unity, and unchangeability apply. 2. Hashem acts in the creation, and His actions, which are sometimes called His expressions and His revelations, are not his essence, even though they too, as we saw in the last episode, are infinite, beyond our own imagination, beyond the physical. Now, if we fail to maintain the difference between essence and these expressions, these actions, then we will be implying that Hashem is composite and not truly one, chas v'shalom. 3. Understanding both the difference and the connection between his essence and his expressions, and likewise understanding the difference between him and us, i.e. between his expressions and our expressions, is the key to understanding everything, the key to unlocking the entire discussion. It's sophisticated, but if you remember this structure, essence versus expression, and his essence and expressions versus ours, you will be able to follow along everything that comes next. Again, understanding the difference and connection between his essence versus his expressions, as well as understanding the difference between him and us, his expressions and our expressions, is the key to all this. So, back to the Tzemach Tzedek. We said that he used the words simple meaning when it comes to how we should understand the Torah's descriptions of Hashem. We should understand them in their simple meaning. But we highlighted there, very importantly, that he didn't say physical meaning, a very important point. It's also true that we don't mean to say that God is spiritual either. Even the highest spiritual realm is a distant metaphor for the truth of his essence and being, no closer than even the lowliest physical pebble. That's how great and exalted he is. However, as we've been saying, we are the Mashal and he is the Nimshal. This applies to everything, to his essence and our essence. Yes, we have an essence. We're going to get onto that soon. To his expressions and our expressions, we have expressions too. Even to the way essence and expression connect, both in him and in us. This applies to all creation. So now, let's take a moment to understand what Mashal and Nimshal is. Because like we said, we are the Mashal in terms of our essence and our expressions, and he is the Nimshal of both of those. His essence is the Nimshal of our essence, and his expressions are the Nimshal of our expressions. And this is key, because without grasping this, we cannot understand how the Torah speaks about Hashem truthfully, yet without limiting him. Rambam says throughout the Moreh Nevuchim, but especially in Part 1, chapters 56 and 57, that there is absolutely no comparison between us and him in any way whatsoever. He calls it homonym, which I guess is even stronger than metaphor. This applies even to the terms like existence, power, life, will, wisdom, first, last. Hashem is first, Hashem is last. What does it mean for us to have a hand and Hashem to have a hand? But they are nothing alike, share no common definition at all. A good way to illustrate this is through the idea of a parable, a mashal. A parable is a teaching device to help someone understand something by dressing it up in a story. The story is nothing like the concept that is there to explain, but, and this is key, the truth of the concept is found in the story. For example, we want to teach children about greed, quite a sophisticated concept for young children. We want to teach them how it comes from selfishness and it leads to theft, and no actual gain, but rather a loss whenever we are greedy. This is far too abstract for infants, for young children to understand, so we tell them a story about a fox who, in his greed, broke through a hole in a vineyard fence and gorged himself on grapes to his heart's satisfaction. But then he was too fat to get out the same hole, so in the end he had to fast in order to get out. Cute story, right? Well, the abstract concept of greed is very different, in fact absolutely incomparable to a fox gorging himself. So different that if the child was to go home and tell his mother, "Today we learn about foxes in school," the parent would likely call the teacher and complain, saying, "You're not teaching my kid what you're supposed to teach. You're supposed to be teaching about morality, not foxes." And the teacher, for his part, would be upset, saying, "No, I didn't teach about foxes. What are you talking about? I was teaching about greed." There is absolutely no comparison between the figures and events of a parable and the actual lesson the parable is coming to teach. Literally nothing at all. However, and this is important, the entire truth is there, reachable only through wisdom and perception. And when the child grows, matures, and thinks deeply about the parable, the child will learn about the original Nimshal. If the parable is perfect, the child would learn everything about it. All the details are there. For example, The fox is chosen wisely because foxes are cunning and arrogant, and this teaches that greed is rooted in arrogance. In a perfect mashal, the student can absorb the entire idea of greed purely from the story of a fox and some grapes, or at least he will as he gets older and contemplates the mashal, which, like a time-release capsule, will gradually make him an expert in the entire idea in its very truth. When he eventually does study about greed directly, he will recognize it. Get it? The Rebbe Rashab thus explains in Maimah V'Yadata that our entire world is a perfect metaphor of Hashem's truth and being. In fact, a metaphor within a metaphor, many layers deep, but that's not for here. This principle, that the world is a perfect mashal for divine truth, is a cornerstone of Chabad Hasidut, beginning already in the Alter Rebbe's Tanya Shah HaYichud V'Ha'emunah, and that is rooted in the Zohar and developed deeply by the Rebbe Rashab here. The Tzedek traces this idea as part of the mitzvah of Ha'amanat Elokut in Derech Mitzvatecha in the prologue and in part 1, going all the way back to the Rambam. See there. So therefore, we can conclude that the reality that we exist in is nothing at all like his truth and being, and saying so is heretical, just as foolish as the child who thinks that the lesson was about foxes and not greed. But that does not mean that there is no connection between us and him. On the contrary, it's a perfect metaphor, and thus nothing is lost in the mashal, and nothing extraneous is added to the mashal either. If we utilize the wisdom of the Torah, we can indeed learn everything about Hashem that it is possible for a creation to know. The issue of thinking about him in our terms is that we are the mashal, so we should instead be striving to see through the mashal. Because it is a perfect mashal, it is ultimately true and not a necessary fiction as some people have mistakenly come to conclude. Now, with all this, we can understand the strong statements such as that Hashem is ineffable, there is no comparison whatsoever to anything with him, and anything that can enter our mind is just pure imagination on our part, and thus the descriptions of the Hashem in the Torah are anthropomorphic. Indeed, he is ineffable, but the correct understanding is not that the Torah is being anthropomorphic, but if you're listening carefully, you realize that he created us to be theomorphic. Right? Meaning, we are the metaphor. Thus, returning to the Tzedek statement, when the Torah describes Hashem, we are meant to take it in its simple meaning, not in the sense of literal physicality, chas v'shalom, but in the sense that the statement is truly true. These descriptions, his hand, his will, his love, are more true than our human expressions of the same terms. Ours are the metaphor, his are the reality. Amitat mitziut Hashem. That is why we cannot picture them, not because they are false, but because they are so utterly true and exalted that they are ineffable, beyond mental representation. That's the real meaning of kiviyachal, so to speak. It's not a disclaimer, it's a reverent pause. It signals what I'm saying is absolutely true, but I have no words to express it adequately. As if it were possible to say such a thing. Because it's not possible to say what is truly true. It's beyond words. As the Rabbi says, and so it is with love, so to speak, kaviyachal. There is no stronger expression. So we say kaviyachal as if to say, this is the entire love of the Almighty for the Jewish people. But in truth, it is even stronger, utterly beyond all comparison. In other words, we must never say Hashem doesn't really love you. That's not a pious statement. It is a tragic misunderstanding. Instead, we must say, Hashem's love for you is so infinite, so perfect, so true, that you cannot even fathom it. That doesn't make the relationship less real, it makes it infinitely more real. And this is the truth. Our view indeed necessitates us in looking at ourselves as theomorphic in order to avoid violating our beliefs in Hashem's oneness and perfection, while still being able to climb the ladder cautiously towards him. So in the next episode, let's get deeply into the actual difference between essence and expression, because we're going to have to cover that, and then we'll be able to show a similarity between us and Hashem, one that unlocks everything. And this similarity between him and us is everything we need to unlock the notion that just like his emotions are not him, which is true and important, it's the same with us. We are not our emotions, and thus saying that Hashem doesn't have emotions does not mean he doesn't feel for us. Stay tuned. In the previous episode, we covered the idea of Mashal and Nimshal and used that to explain the strength of the theological statements of the differences between us and Hashem, and also showed that those differences, on the one hand, can imply that we are nothing like Hashem, but on the other hand still leave room for us to be a very distant metaphor for him, and therefore more similar than those statements that we heard might initially lead us to believe. We also introduced the idea that we're going to be talking about the difference between essence and expression, i.e. that somebody's actions are not him, but they do come from him, and while maintaining that separation, we have to also maintain the connection. We also began to introduce the idea of the difference between essence and action. The actions that a person takes are not him, but they do come from him and express him. They are expressions, they are revelations of the essence. We hinted that we also have an essence and an expression, and therefore the difference between us and Hashem does not revolve around this. So now we're really starting to take off. Now we're really starting to take off, flying around the world, almost leaving the atmosphere at super speed. Until now, we've been focused on one side of this theological picture, the side that emphasizes how infinitely separate Hashem is from us. We've shown how his descriptions in the Torah are true, even though they refer to a reality infinitely beyond anything we know, beyond all comparison. But that brings us to a crucial point we've only briefly mentioned before. There is a profound difference between Hashem's essence and his expressions. Confusing the two leads to serious mistakes. It implies that Hashem has parts, chas v'shalom, or that he is a composite being, which contradicts the absolute oneness of our theology and our emunah. We also briefly touched upon the point that we also have an essence and an expression. Now it's time to discuss the differences and connections between essence and expression in detail, because this distinction is vital to understanding how Hashem's love, will, or regret, and the rest of the Torah's descriptions can be absolutely real in the way that we understand them for ourselves, minus the infinite bridge of Nimshal Mashal difference that we discussed in the previous episode, even if they are not his essence. After all, if his love is just an expression, but so is ours, then what makes his love any less true than ours? If anything, we'll come to see the opposite is true. So once again, so far we've been exploring the difference between Hashem's essence and our essence, as well as the difference between his expressions and our expressions. Now we're turning to a new but related question, the relationship between essence and expression themselves. Because in this is a surprising truth. When we examine this carefully, we will find that in this area there is far less difference between us and Hashem than many people think. We will also see that much of the confusion in theology comes from failing to distinguish between these issues and categories properly, as well as assuming that what applies to expression can't lead back to essence, which is another thing we're going to get into. Much of what the Rambam sets out to do in the Moreh Nevuchim is to help us avoid a critical mistake, confusing Hashem's essence with his expressions. Many of the theological misunderstandings that Rav Hirsch pointed to, especially the claim that Hashem doesn't really love us, come from not properly distinguishing the discussion above of the difference between him and us, Mashal and Nimshal, and all that, and the difference between essence and expression. So, to grasp the difference between essence and expression, we need to return back to the remaining unresolved issues with regards to Hashem being one, unchanging, and perfect. All of these lead to serious problems and contradictions, right? The first one is his unity. He is one, so that means he cannot have any limbs or emotions, right? These would imply multiplicity in him, chas v'shalom, that he's composite, made up of parts like a human body. The second is his immutability, his unchanging nature. Him being unchanging also implies that he cannot have emotions, right? Emotions are dynamic and imply change. If he becomes happy or he falls in love, that means beforehand he was not happy or in love, right? And thus he's changed. And the third one is his perfection. If he is perfect, it means he's complete. He can't gain anything. How can you make someone who's heard every joke laugh, right? Each of these objections seems at first to rule out the possibility of of real divine feeling. After all, how can someone who already knows everything, who lacks nothing, and is utterly one and unchanging, ever feel something new? And so, many well-meaning people conclude, mistakenly, but understandably, that all descriptions of Hashem, including love, anger, desire, even basic concepts like existence and will, don't really apply to him at all. Instead, they say, these are merely constructs, created for our benefit, tools that help us relate to him on our level. From this view, Hashem doesn't truly love us. Rather, he creates a kind of illusion that makes it appear as if he does, just to motivate us to serve him, keep mitzvot, and earn reward. But this leads to a tragic conclusion, that Hashem's entire relationship with us is a teaching tool, not a real connection. And from there, some go further still, suggesting that to believe otherwise is immature, naive, and even heretical. To need Hashem to love us is merely a human weakness, unbefitting true emunah. But as we'll see, that too is a misunderstanding, and a deeply painful one. Here's the core understanding that we need to and will be correcting. People assume that the reason we can fall in love and feel is because we are complex beings, made up of parts, like a body, a soul, a mind, various emotions. And since Hashem has no parts, they conclude that he cannot love or feel in any real way. But that's not true. This all stems from a mistaken belief that we don't have a true distinction between essence and expression, while he does. In fact, the opposite is true. Just like with Hashem, our emotions are also expressions of our essence, of our self, not our essence itself. I am not my feelings, I am not my emotions. I am the one who has them, who acts through the vessel of emotions. And just as that doesn't make our emotions fake, it certainly doesn't make his any less real either. As is brought in many Kabbalistic works, from Pardes Rimonim to Tanya to Shaarei by the Mittler Rabbi, we are very similar to Hashem, even in these regards. Our essence, our self, and our expressions, like our will, knowledge, and feeling, are also separate, like Hashem. And just like that does not imply that we don't really love, feel, or desire, it also does not imply this of Hashem. By understanding ourselves better, we can understand Hashem better too. And as such, we will not have anything preventing us from taking the Torah seriously and simply in its statements about his feelings and relationship with us. Let's begin with the Rambam. He tells us that Hashem's emotions and other such descriptions are not part of his essence at all. They are actions or effects, not intrinsic traits. They exist only in relation to us. And to cut a long story short, Kabbalists and Hasidim basically agree. Even when they are saying that Hashem's love is real, they explain that it's a creation, an expression, a revelation, something rooted in the spiritual worlds of Atzilut, and not in his essence. So, does that mean that we're back to square one again? That Hashem's love isn't really his? That it's just a high-level metaphor applying to some high spiritual world? Not at all. This is where the deeper sources take us further, and as I'll show you, this isn't my own interpretation. The Kabbalists themselves go out of their way to explain these expressions truly do reflect him in a way far more profound than we usually imagine. Firstly, yes, emotions are creations, not essence. This is true of us as well as Hashem, as I've been saying. This is not something that works differently with us and him, such that we can say that he doesn't love us, as I've said. In fact, confusing us with our expressions is just as highly offensive to us as it is to Hashem, as we will discuss further on. It is an offense of superficiality. The Tzedek says that when we talk about Hashem's love, Hashem's Gevurah, we are talking about the Sefirot of Atzilut, which is a creation just as distant from his essence as the physical world. See Derech Mitzvotecha Ha'amanut Elokut, chapters 4 to 6. Importantly, this does not contradict the idea that we have been building. The key message in this work is that the fact that Chesed and Gevurah are creations, even spiritual ones, does not make them inauthentic. Quite the opposite. Just as our emotions are not our essence, but still reflect our deeper selves, so too with Hashem. When Hashem expresses love through the sphere of Chesed, or judgment through the sphere of Gevurah, these are real, personal expressions of his. They are not random forces or detached emanations. They are not machines producing love, producing chesed from nothing. They are vehicles through which He is revealed. And just like with us, the fact that they are expressions doesn't make them any less meaningful. As I said, the misconception comes from the misunderstanding that our emotions are part of our essence, whereas with Hashem, they are just creations. They think that our emotions are part of who we are, but not so of Hashem. With Him, they're just symbolic or external. But that's not true at all. Our emotions are not part of our essence either. When it comes to Hashem, and when it comes to us, emotions are vehicles through which the self is revealed. But they are not the self. They are not the same substance as the self. For example, with the sentence, I love you. This illustrates it. When I say I love you, I am the one loving. But the I, which is my core self, my essence, is not love. It is the one who loves. My love may come and go, grow or fade, but my essence remains constant. I am me. I am always me. And I, right now, am loving. And my love is directed to you. And you are you. That me, the I, my very self, is not my love. My love is merely an emotion that I sometimes feel, sometimes do not. In fact, it's deeply reductive when someone confuses your emotions with your essence, and it can be painful. It's like somebody marrying you because of your money or because of your love, one of the things about you, but not you yourself, and that hurts. That's offensive. Deep topic, right? Confusing the two is not just inaccurate, it's painful. If somebody reduces me to my love and ignores me, they miss who I truly am. That kind of misrecognition can feel profoundly isolating and make me feel all alone in the world. Certainly don't do that with Hashem. That's the very definition of idol worship. Worshipping the Sefirot and not Him, i.e. worshipping His love and not Him. To confuse His expressions, like His love or judgment, with His very self, is not deep spirituality. Actually, it's a form of avodah zarah, idolizing the expression instead of Him. Rabbi Friedman says, don't marry for love, marry for her, marry for him, for the person. Once you are into them, then their love becomes important to you because it's their love, not the other way around. Same is true with Hashem. Understanding the difference between essence and expression is the foundation of true intimacy and the deepest root of all morality, sensitivity, and holiness. Tzedek addresses this directly when he warns that even great thinkers have made a critical mistake, imagining that the Sefirot of Atzilut operate on their own, like fixed spiritual machines generating chesed or gevurah independently. But that's not the case at all. Hashem is the one who loves, and He loves through the Sefirot of chesed. Hashem is the one who knows, and He knows through the Sefirot of Da'at. The Sefirot are not divine forces with their own agency. They are vehicles through which Hashem expresses Himself. The Tzedek insists that Kabbalistic language must not be read mechanically, but personally, even intimately. This isn't just big, cosmic, heavenly apparatus or systems. They are descriptions of Hashem's own persona, so to speak. How He chooses to make Himself known. And that's part of why Kabbalah was once kept secret and reserved only for the most sensitive. Not the most clever, but the most sensitive. Not because it was abstract, but because it was so deeply personal. Now moving further, next, Tzedek goes on to explain a difference between us and Hashem here. Although of course it doesn't reduce the truth and relevance of His love for us, but it actually increases it. He explains that while the Sefirot are not Hashem's essence, they are also not creations in the ordinary sense, like tables or trees, or even like our souls. They are not separate or fabricated. Rather, they are from what's called elokus, from godliness. They are literally godliness. We will explore what this means in the next episode, but the takeaway is this. If you think you really love, and Hashem doesn't, you've got it backwards. Ein machshvatai machshvatechem. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Lo derachav derachenu. His ways are not our ways. Your love truly is a creation for you, a vehicle you've been given. a most kind and generous gift from Hashem. You were given a soul with a heart inside it, and you can use that as a vehicle to express yourself. Like we said above, I love you. The I that is me is doing the activity called loving. When it comes to Hashem though, His love is somehow even more real and authentic than this. This is the secret of the mystery of He and His expressions are one, brought in the Tanya. So in the next episode, we're going to try to understand how this love of Hashem really does trace its way all the way back to His essence. We're going to look at some truly amazing sources that show us how Hashem's expressions trace their origins way, way above Atzilut, beyond even the Simsim. They come directly from Hashem Himself. And even that is not a contradiction to the unity of His essence, but at the same time magnifies how deep and authentic His love is for you, His need is for you. Stay tuned. So far, we've seen that Hashem's essence and His expressions are different. Now, we're going to take it even further. We're going to show that they're not just expressions. They trace their origins all the way up to His very self, as authentic and as true as can be, in a magnificent, mysterious way that changes everything. As we leave the atmosphere, let's pause and reflect on what we've just said. We said that His love and feelings are creations, albeit lofty creations that arise from godliness, existing within the spiritual realm of Atzilut. And for many who've learned Kabbalah seriously, this is exactly where they stop. This is where they will say that I am wrong. Many who have studied a lot of Panimiyat Torah will say that they agree with me up until this point, but no further. They will say, whenever the Torah says that He loves us and He needs us and He is angry at us, and all the other descriptions, they agree. Yes, Hashem's love exists in Atzilut. Yes, it's rooted in Elokut and it's infinite. But, they argue, that's where it ends. Whenever the Torah says that Hashem loves, desires, regrets, or gets angry, it's only referring to Atzilut, not Hashem Himself. This is a common and sincere objection, but it's also something that we will now need to deal with, because the sources do go deeper than that. For example, there's a remarkable series of Maimarim in Shaarei by the Mittler Rabbi, a very chashuv sefer, that explains that no, this is not the end of the story. In fact, he specifically says in chapter 8, the same as the Tzedek in Hamanat Elokut, chapter 11, that these lofty Sefirot receive from the Sefirot of Atik Yamin, a higher spiritual realm beyond comprehension. And these Sefirot receive from the Sefirot of Adam Kadmon, the most abstract and primordial stage of creation, Hashem's first thought, so to speak. And then, shockingly, it goes even further, like the Alter Rebbe in Lahavin Masha Amabas Rodachayim, that these receive from the Malchut, the emotions of Or Ein Sof, as if words could describe such a thing, but it says it right there. And then he takes it all the way up to the top, that they are concealed within Hashem's very Atzmus, His very essence, Himself. He goes on to explain this even more conclusively in the following chapters. For example, that there are 3 stages in the process of Atzmus revealing Himself, Yachid, Echad, and Kadmon, and says that the Sefirot are hidden even in Yachid, the hidden essence of the Hiyuli of Atzmus Ein Sof Himself. This is indeed what the Tzedek was getting at when he said that these Sefirot are made from godliness. So what do we learn from all this? The Sefirot are from Elokut. They are not just divine tools, but they are flowing from the essence itself. Hashem's expressions truly do originate from Him on the very highest levels, and the sources say this explicitly. If you want to understand this, then go ahead and learn Shaarei. As the Rabbi Rashab said, when it comes to Ein Sof, it doesn't mean that He's infinite. That's a misnomer. It actually means that He's beyond all limits, even the limit of being beyond limits. Now we can kind of understand that. Ein Sof means beyond all limitation, not only beyond finitude, but even beyond the category of being beyond. That's what essence is. It's absolutely all capable, kol yachol, especially His supreme self. And therefore, nothing is excluded from Him. not even what appears to be expression. Everything, including Hashem's love and involvement with us, comes from Him and Him alone. At this point, the Mittler Rebbe devotes an entire chapter to addressing a very pressing question, which I'm sure you're thinking right now. If Hashem's expressions are real and stem from Him, how can this not imply a change? How can He remain unchanging if He loves, desires, and acts? To resolve this, he introduces the foundational concept of Simsum and Rishima. Through these, he explains that from our perspective, we perceive a dynamic unfolding of divine activity, but from Hashem's perspective, there is absolutely no change. He remains utterly one, utterly unchanged. So, again, you might think, are we back to square one? Are we just saying again, it's only from our point of view, but it's not really true in some way? Is this now the final theological dead end? Not quite. Because what follows next changes everything. Indeed, some will be at this madrega in their learning. They've learnt Shaarei. At this point, some people, even serious students of Chassidut, will say, I followed you this far, but no further. It feels like a roller coaster, doesn't it? Every time we climb to a new understanding of how Hashem's love or will or need could be real, we are suddenly told, yes, but not there, only on that level, not that level. The ground shifts beneath us constantly. It's dizzying. But this experience isn't a failure. It's part of the journey. The Mittler Rebbe himself describes this cycle, this kind of spiritual seesaw. Longing, clarity, confusion, and then deeper clarity. And the process doesn't mean we're lost. It means we're getting close. He says that a person has, in equal measure, love and awe of Hashem in his soul. A person wants to know Hashem, and his learning progresses like a seesaw. He hears that there's a level of Hashem that we can't understand, and this makes him so sad he mamash hates his life. Then he gains an understanding of even this level, and there is an equal measure of joy, unbridled joy. Then he hits another ceiling, another madrega of Yediat Hashem that he is told we cannot understand, and he's back to hating his very life. This is what he's talking about. Those who study these topics will relate. We find a beautiful source that says something deep about Hashem. Then we are told that this is only about Atzilut, and beyond we can't understand. Then we're told about Adam Kadmon. Then we're getting a little more ground. But then beyond that we can't understand. Then we're told about Sovev Kol Olamim, then Atzmut, and then the hidden midot of Atzmut, and then we're told that we can't understand that, and then even that we start to gain an understanding about. If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself. Work hard on it. All the sources I'm giving you, go and look at them with a teacher. Work as hard on it as you do on your Gemara learning. I promise you, Hashem will bless your learning and you will see results. But I don't blame anybody for finding this incredible or unbelievable. On the one hand, we are told that we can't understand Hashem himself, his Asmut, and this actually makes perfect sense. How could we? But on the other hand, this raises a host of deep, difficult questions. If we can't understand him, then how can the Torah speak about him at all? How can he create time and exist outside of time and yet act within time? How can he be unchanging and yet desire, command, relate, judge, forgive? How can he choose, truly choose, if he lacks nothing? How can free will exist, or relationship, or meaning? These questions aren't fringe. They're at the heart of how we relate to Hashem. Yet many don't get bothered by this. They don't try to understand because we reassure ourselves that it's meant to be this way. Atzmut is something that we aren't supposed to be able to understand after all. But deep down, our neshamas feel this existential pain. How can we not hate our lives, knowing that we can never understand Hashem? So in the next episode, we're going to work our way right to the top. We're going to iron out these theological issues that make people mistakenly think that we can't get to know Hashem. We can, and I'll show you how. Stay tuned. Now we are really taking off. We're leaving the solar system altogether and heading out into the stars. In the last episode, we reached yet another ceiling and we lamented. Isn't it annoying? Isn't it saddening? Isn't it deeply depressing that no matter how much closer we seem to be able to get to Hashem in our learning, we always encounter another ceiling, and it feels like the seesaw is a roller coaster, and we can never truly get his feelings all the way up to his very self. It seems like there's a disconnect. That's not true. And in this episode, we're going to show that indeed, not only can we get to be in an intimate relationship with a level of God, even the highest level, but with Hashem himself. And that is the very purpose of what the Baal Shem Tov life's mission and teachings were to achieve. So let's pause for a moment and reflect. The Baal Shem Tov recorded in a letter to his brother-in-law that he once ascended into the chamber of the Mashiach and asked, "When will you come?" And the Mashiach replied, "When your wellsprings spread to the outside." Now, this is talking about outside the Kabbalist's cave, outside the Chassid's shtetl, outside the mind of a Rebbe, and reaching even the non-Jews deep in the jungle. So what teachings are we talking about that have to get this far? What is the Mashiach about? That we should serve Hashem with joy? That Hashem recreates the world every moment, like the famous teachings of the Baal Shem Tov? Is this what really needs to reach the chutzah? Can't be. It can't be. It can't just be that. As beautiful as those ideas are, firstly, they're not revolutionary, and secondly, everybody knows them by now. Are these really the ideas that the Mashiach is waiting for to spread to the ends of the earth? It must be something much more Mashiachic than that. Surely, it's bringing Atzmus to the chutzah, bringing Hashem himself. This is the purpose of the Torah, and this is repeated over and over by the students of the Besht, especially the Chabad Rebbeim, who tell us that every word and every letter of the Torah reveals him. So, no, we are not back to square one. We are never back to square one. And the Mittler Rebbe, or the school of the Baal Shem Tov, helps us understand all this. Starting with Simpson, by giving us a Mashal of our own soul. He gives us a Mashal in chapter 13 of the soul's vitality in the body. He explains that the soul is affected by the body, right? It feels the body's pain when the body is injured. But he says explicitly there that the feeling that the soul experiences does not change the soul in its essence. And this is what I was trying to explain previously. If we replace the word essence, which is hard to understand, with something more familiar, the word self, i.e., we are talking about your very self, who you actually are at the very, very core. You are always you. Who you are, the real, deep, essential you, is unchanging. No matter what you do, no matter what you feel, experience, you are still who you are, the same person, the same identity, whatever word you want to use. You are you. And that you remains the same even as your experiences come and go. It's very hard to talk about, but we're talking about something so close and personal to everyone. Talking about your very self, who you're referring to when you say I or me, that this should be something that you are familiar with. Don't let the philosophical terms confuse you. This is called your essence in philosophy, discussed at length in the Orah, in Kabbalah and Chassidut, and even in secular philosophy. And as the Rambam says in the Moreh Nevuchim, essence can express, but this does not in any way reflect any change within or of the essence itself. This is true of you as well as Hashem, as we shall see. This is the key to putting it all together. When we question Atzmut, we need to be clear, what is the question? What are we asking? Are we asking what is Atzmut? Or are we asking who he is? These are two very different types of questions. The what question is a difficult one, maybe even an impossible one. It's the same kind of question as asking, what is a person? Or what is the I that is me? Philosophers have struggled with this for centuries. Concepts like consciousness, qualia, subjectivity, the self, all of these are attempts to describe the same core mystery. And we intuitively realize that it can't be fully grasped because whatever you use to examine it, your intellect, your language, your categories, are already expressions, tools that come after the self. You're trying to use part of yourself to analyze the whole of yourself. So the question, what is essence, becomes inherently paradoxical. But the question of who is the one that feels, knows, chooses, loves, that's deeply meaningful and answerable. You can know who you are, and you can know who Hashem is. Because we are both selves, however you say it. We are both real. Our essence is not an idea or category. It is the one who has ideas, the one who relates, who expresses. And so we don't need to get lost in the what of Atzmus to understand what matters most. We just need to know. Just as we have a self that can express without being altered by those expressions, so too with Hashem. This is not just a similarity. This is the Mashal and the Nimshal that we were talking about. At this point of the discussion, one might ask about Tzimtzum. It sounds like this implies that Hashem's connection to us is not authentic, as Hashem limited himself at this stage. He originally could express himself through infinite Sefirot, but now he limits himself to 10 that he emanated. Therefore, imagining that he loves us, the sphere of Chesed, sounds a bit silly. Even if his love is infinite, which is of course true, the sphere of Chesed of Atzilut is truly infinite, love itself seems infinitely small and insignificant to him. Not to mention that he loves us and our righteous deeds, which are far more insignificant still. So the Tzedek clarifies that a Tzimtzum is much greater than your typical mashal, like when a teacher explains a lesson to a student by putting it into a much more simplified version. It's much greater than that. It's infinitely greater than that, in fact. So much so that the Rambam rightly calls it a homonym. But the Tzedek does clarify that it's not completely different. It's different only in scale, far, far greater. And still, it's a perfect mashal, even if it's an infinite one. Also, by the way, he, and basically all of Hasidus, clarifies another misconception. We are not insignificant to him, even if love is. Yes, love is completely insignificant to him. If he could have us without love, he would. Love is a creation so that he could have us, because that's what we need. But his need for us is as essential as his own essence is to him. And therefore, one can say that he created love in order to have us, like I just said, rather than the other way around, i.e. the famous idea that he created us because he likes to do chesed. It's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the other way around. And this is what I meant earlier when I said that the difference between us and Hashem is not in whether he can feel, will, or act. The difference lies in the scale and the distance. His self is infinitely greater than ours, but the structure, essence that expresses without change, that's not foreign to us. It's exactly how we work too, and that's why we can relate to him. The difference between us and Hashem is not that we can love and he cannot, chas v'shalom. It's that his love is infinitely more real, more essential, more true than ours, because our love is a mashal for his. And so, when we learn about the unity of Hashem, that he is one, unchanging, indivisible, this does not mean that he doesn't love, or choose, or care. It means that all of those things are flowing perfectly from his essence, just as they do from ours, but even more so, in an even more unified way, in an even more infinite way. The good news is that we don't even need to wrestle with a complex philosophical question of what is Atzmus, what is essence, in order to know that Hashem truly loves us. That's not required to understand the basic truth that we're establishing here. We've already seen that his essence, just like your own, can express without undergoing any change whatsoever. And if that's true, then his love, his care, his presence are completely real and completely consistent with his oneness. This holds true for you too. Your essence remains unchanged, even as you express love, pain, joy, or longing. You're still you after all of that, and he is still him after all of that too. So, understanding the what of essence is certainly a curiosity, let's say, for intellectuals. And this video series is of course here to provide a way to prove Hashem's expressions are real from a rigorous theological standpoint. But for 99% of the Baal Shem Tov's beloved simple Jews trying to understand Hashem and his Torah, we don't need to understand that question. We just need to know that his expressions, like ours, are his, expressing himself, and thus real in the same way that ours are. But again, infinitely more. We can relate to him simply. He is a someone, not a something, a who, not a what. Going back to the theology though, much of Hasidus about Atzmus focuses on this elusive what, asking what it means for something to be beyond description, beyond category, and beyond limitation. And people often make a critical mistake. They hear that Hashem's essence is unknowable, and beyond all relation, and they assume, therefore, that this must mean that his love or emotions aren't real, that they're not truly him. But this is not what the teachings are saying. It's a confusion between the indescribability of the what and the reality of the who. Yes, Atzmus is itself beyond being defined, beyond being limited, even beyond being beyond, like we said. But that doesn't mean that his expressions are somehow disconnected or inauthentic or untrue, chas v'shalom. So, let's recap. In this episode, we asked some of the deepest questions of all. What is essence? Who is Hashem? In the next episode, we will find out how essence can actually be revealed through expressions, how we can get to know him through Torah. Stay tuned. This discussion around Hashem's essence is going to launch us to new heights, right out of the galaxy. If Hashem's essence is unknowable, how can his Torah be a revelation of him? If his emotions and will are expressions, how can they still be one with him? In this episode, we explore how Torah and mitzvot are not just divine instructions, they are divine revelations. We'll learn how Hashem's will flows directly from his essence and how your choices connect not just to a level of God, but to Hashem himself. So finally, let's get a good hold of the difference between essence and expression by looking at ourselves. There's a very good exercise we can all do. Try this. Ask yourself, what are the things that I have, my expressions, versus what is me, my actual self, my actual essence? One way to tell the difference is what I call the essence test. If you can say my about it, then it isn't you. My body? Clearly not me. Most people, especially women, instinctively know that I am not my body, right? My love? That too, not the essence. We already explained that your love is something that you have, something that you feel, something that you do, not what you are. How about my soul? Right? You may have heard that your soul is the real you, but even that isn't quite accurate. It still fails the essence test. If it's my soul, then it's something that you possess, not something that is your deepest root. We learn in Kabbalah that your soul consists of what you know and what you feel, your faculties and traits. But all of these change over time. We are taught that they're more like levushim to the higher levels. You can learn more, feel differently, grow, fall, change, and yet you still remain you. Even if a person fundamentally changes through teshuvah or chas v'shalom by losing their memory, dementia, Alzheimer's, we still say that they are the same person. We don't erase their name. We don't nullify their ketubah, right? We don't force them to get divorced. Why? Because the essence, the I, is still there. We still see them as the same person. Fundamentally, they are a person, maybe a damaged person or a changed, transformed person, but they're still the same ultimate core of who they are. It's still them. Still, what you know and what you feel do in some sense define you, right? They are close to the real you. So what's closer? Your will. The Kabbalah says that the root of your soul is your will, your ratzon, your keter. You can tell a lot about somebody by what they want, especially our most essential core desires and values. But still, if you think about it, even that is not truly you. It's my will, not me, and thus fails the essence test too. What's higher than will? Not much, actually. The Kabbalah and the Chassidut tell us that even within will, there are levels. There is the will, higher than that is desire, and pleasure still is higher. And higher than that is the yechidah, the essential need, the core identity, the unchanging part of your soul. That simply is, that doesn't operate through faculties or desires. This is practically all the way there. In fact, the yechidah sometimes is described as the real you in the Chassidut. But we learn that there are higher levels too. When it comes to the real you, the one who wants, the one who knows, the one who experiences, feels with a soul, that fills a body. What is that? The answer is that we haven't got words for it. It's ineffable. It's indivisible. There's only one of you, can't be changed, can't be divided, can't be described, not composite, but one, not located in any place in particular, not limited. You were given 10 Sefirot, but maybe you could be given more. Sound familiar? It should. That's exactly how Chassidus and even the Moreh Nevuchim describe the essence of Hashem. We are now describing the philosophical category of essence, which is the Moreh Nevuchim's main topic, as well as the central topic of all Kabbalah and Chassidut. Even we have an essence, as I've been saying all along, and it is that essence of ours that does all of these actions, such as desiring, experiencing, feeling, knowing. Indeed, now you see what I mean. If we can truly desire, know, and love, so can Hashem, right? This is not the difference between us, i.e., that we can love and feel, and He does not, chas v'shalom. No, as the Tzedek clarifies in Hamanat Elokut, the difference between us and Him is one of scale and distance only. Even though that scale and distance is truly beyond infinite, such that the Rambam rightly calls it a homonym, it's still a connected line from bottom to top. And that's the real meaning of what it means that Hashem is one, and that the Simsum is lo kepeshuto. Another thing that we learned through doing this exercise is that expression and essence are not truly separated after all. They are connected in a wondrous way that allows our expressions to truly become authentic revelations of the essence. They connect from your body to your heart, to your mind, to your soul, to your will, your keter, and then the soul of your soul, and then in a line, a chain, unbroken, cause and effect. It eventually interfaces directly with essence, where it makes a remarkable leap that is beyond cause and effect, but nonetheless true and real, connected without being connected in any way that we can say. We are going from things to essence, and essence isn't describable as a what, but as a who. We use words like you and me, him, someone, not something. That's really what essence is. Who, not what. Someone, not something. We have learned that you can reveal who you are in your very essence through your expressions, bit by bit, expression by expression, as we will explain in more detail soon. But to summarize, who, not what. When it comes to the what of essence, we can't even grasp our own. Let's be real. Who knows what an I is or a self is? Leave it to the philosophers. And if we can't understand our own, then surely we can't understand Hashem's. It's all philosophy, abstract, distant, and frankly, most people, even brilliant minds, should approach this with extreme caution. Many have erred here, even Gedolim, and I don't say this lightly or on my own authority. Of course not. Tzedek brings it. We've seen it in history. Just look at the debates between great Gedolim around Simsum Kepeshuto versus Lo Kepeshuto, or the confusion surrounding the Sefirot, Hashem's names, and the nature of divine attributes. These mistakes have done real damage, hence this whole series, for example, to undo one of the damages that have been done. The one where we've pushed Hashem into a mystical box labeled ineffable, where we stop thinking about Him and seeing Him as real, chas v'shalom, chaval. We've swept Him away into mystery, assuming that if He's beyond definition, He must also be beyond relationship. But that's a mistake. Fakert, when it comes to the who, we can get to know Him, precisely because the created world of expression, the Sefirot, go all the way up to their hidden root in Atzmus, like we proved before. And now hopefully everybody should understand. Through His Torah, He reveals His expressions to us personally, intimately, and fully. As we know from the sources, every letter of Torah reveals Him, His very essence. We get to know Him through His expressions, what He does, what He says, what He thinks, what He feels, what He knows, and what He wants. Mitzvot. You. This is Torah. This is His Ratzon. What He wants. This is the highest expression, revealing the most about Him, like we said. And we can understand this because, as we said, this is true of us too. What we want, what we need, is the highest expression of us, so long as we're being authentic. All the more so with Hashem. Rambam, in the Moreh 3:13, tells us something profound. His will is identical with His essence. There's a perfect mapping one-to-one. He is being infinitely and perfectly authentic. Bli ziyuf. This amazing perfection of His, means that every single level of expression for him, every world, every level of the Seder Hishtalshelet, the spiritual cosmos, and even every atom in the physical world is a true expression of his ultimate unified will and essence. So in this episode, we learned how Hashem's will, his Ratzon, is not something layered on top of him, per se. It flows directly from his very self. That's why every single detail in creation, even the smallest moment in your life, is not separate from him. And in the next episode, we're going to go more into explaining the depth of his will and explain how he does have one simple will. Just like he is one, so too his will is one. And we will explain how he can have such if there are so many details in the creation that he wills on a daily basis. And finally, we will also reveal what that will is. We hinted at in this episode. More on that next episode. Stay tuned. So now it's time to leave the universe altogether and head into the black hole of Hashem's essence. The route we took here is through Hashem's Ratzon, higher and higher, through his desire, his ta'anug, and now into the very event horizon beyond which we cannot speak any further. If everything Hashem does is an expression of his unified essence, then that includes something profound. You, your existence, your choices, and your mitzvot are not just part of his plan, they are his plan. In this episode, we explore one of the boldest teachings in Chassidut, that Hashem doesn't just want us, he needs us. Not as a lack, but as a pure expression of who he is. Starting with the Mittler Rebbe, he says at the end of chapter 7 of Shaarei, this is as stated, whatever Hashem desired, he did. Tehillim. Similarly, below in man, what difference is there between the aspect of his desire and essence? For example, Hashem's own desire for his essential self, his Atzmut, and the most final desire to actualize, i.e., even the last atom in Asiya, all came from and are rooted in one source. Likewise, there is no difference between Hashem's simple desire that was drawn down to become the desire for emanation, and his simple desire that was drawn down to become the aspect of whatever Hashem desired he did, at the end of our world of Asiya, of action. End quote. And what is his supreme will? Well, it's on every page of the Torah, and in every statement, every expression of Hashem. Remember, the higher we go in the chain of life, the closer we get to the essence, like we were saying before. The highest, will, desire, pleasure, need, those are truly our most essential expressions and revelations over that which is unrevealable. So, for example, what I do, one of my lowest expressions, can tell you about me, right? But what I want and what I need in the core of my being, that tells you everything about me. And here we reach one of the most radical and breathtaking truths in all of Torah and Chassidut. Hashem tells us that we are one with him. We are as essential to him as he is to himself. And this is what it means to truly need us in an essential way, in the realm of who, not what. That's why it's perfect and it's not a lack. He's perfect and we are one with him. Therefore, he needs us perfectly. That's not a poetic idea either. That's the ultimate reality. That is Torah. So now we can understand what it really means for Hashem to be one, unchanging and perfect, and yet still love us, desire us, and relate to us in a living, dynamic way, wanting new things from us every single day. None of this represents a change in him. Not at all. From his side, there is only one thing, one pure desire, one will, you. He wants you. Kol Chad. He needs you. All the rest, every detail in Torah, every mitzvah, every expression of love, anger, forgiveness, or closeness, is not a contradiction to that unity. It's an expression of it. Not a change, but a revelation of the essential desire as it unfolds in time and space, in every specific and in every detail. And even the fact that he expresses himself in so many ways does not mean they are separate from his desire, quite the opposite. Kol asher chafetz Hashem asa. Everything he does is a revelation of his one simple want, which is, as we said, a revelation of him. This is exactly why his wanting and needing is not a lack, chas v'shalom. It's because he is authentic. His will isn't layered on top of him. It flows directly from his essence. Romantically, you could say, we are essential to his very self. In his eyes, the multitude of all the world is not many different things. It's just one thing, literally, one will, one desire, no change. You. Think about this deeply. This is what the Alter Rabbi means when he teaches that all is as nothing before him, truly nothing. As the Tzedek explains in chapter 8 of Hamanat Delakut, this doesn't mean that it's literally nothing at all, but rather it's as if it's nothing, because he doesn't consider it different. He gives another mashal in Derech Mitzvotecha Korban Pesach to help us further and make it even more real and familiar. It's like thought is in man. What does it mean that the world is like nothing to him? Well, when we are thinking, we do not consider it as though we are thinking. That's just what it looks like from the outside. And if we were to take a step back and analyze ourselves from like a third-person point of view, yes, we are thinking. We can listen to our own thoughts if we try. That's what it looks like from the outside. But from the inside, we don't even notice we are thinking 99.9% of the time. That's just us being us. Our thoughts are like nothing to us. They are just us. Indeed, the very fact that we can confuse our very self with our body, with our soul, with our thoughts and desires, as most people do most of the time without even realizing it, without even noticing it. That is Simsum, the real meaning of Simsum. A change, but not from our point of view. Similarly, the Simsum Rishon means that we see change in him, but that's not what he sees, not his point of view. All of this applies to you too. When you're thinking, when you're feeling, when you're just being generally conscious, you don't feel like you are thinking and feeling. You are just being. And we can do the impossible. We can find out who you are in your essence too, through your expressing yourself. Let's give an example. Let's go back to discussing your essence. In the last episode, we discussed how even the Yechida is not your true essence. It's actually called in the sources your Esem Neshama Mamash. This is the deepest part of you, ineffable, indivisible, unchanging, sometimes called the chamber of the Mashiach. It's the I beneath everything else. And when that you is placed in the world, given a soul with 10 faculties, a body and its needs, a life with countless challenges and experiences, what happens? You express yourself, bit by bit, situation by situation. And every time, if you're being real, if you're acting with authenticity, what comes out is you, not someone else, not a script, but you. We get to see what you would do in that situation, and that is a revelation of you. We could put you in 10 different situations, and in each one, you would reveal a different aspect of your deeper self. And even though each action is different, they are all yours. They all reflect your essence. That's how we come to know who you truly are. Of course, you have free will. You can choose to act differently in each situation, and maybe sometimes even inauthentically. But that doesn't negate your essence. It is what reveals it. Each time a new facet, and each time a new nuance. Authentic choice, when aligned with your inner truth, shows us the deepest parts of you. And that's how we get to know you. Expression by expression, moment by moment, situation by situation. All this knowledge is true. And even if it might take forever to truly get to know you this way, every authentic action is a window into the real you. And the same is true, lahavdil, and with infinite reverence, about Hashem. Hashem, may he be praised forever and ever, found a way to reveal the unrevealable, and for him is by studying his Torah. When Hashem acts, he is always being authentic. As such, he reveals himself, and we also know that he's perfect. Each of his expressions, therefore, is an authentic revelation of his perfection, and thus perfect. Every one of his authentic actions, whether it be what he wants, feels, or does in every situation, is always flawless, perfect. This is what Rabbi Elbow was saying in the Ikarim quoted before. His expressions are absolutely perfect without any deficiency. That's what it means when we say that the Torah reveals his essence. After all, the Torah's ways are perfect. His kindness is perfect. His wisdom is perfect. His goodness is perfect. His caring is perfect. And his love is perfect, which means that it's vulnerable love, real and caring. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, but a perfection expressed. And his caring, as we said, is authentic and perfect, as we saw in another video on my channel. So this is what Hashem's perfection means, and more. It means that he can express himself in infinite ways, through infinite Sefirot or through none at all. And he doesn't need any help to do that. That's another meaning of perfection for him. He is not limited by any system. We, by contrast, do need help. And yet, he made us perfect too, in this sense, that as a piece of him, we could also have been created with any number of faculties, been placed in any kind of situation or world, and we would still have the capacity to express ourselves freely and authentically. That's what it means to have a little piece of him inside us. But that's already a topic for its own, for another time. So in this episode, we explored the radical truth that Hashem's will to create, to relate, to reveal himself isn't a contradiction to his unity. It's his deepest expression. And what does he want more than anything? You, your mitzvot, your relationship. And that's not poetic, that is Torah. And while the idea that Hashem needs us may sound strange at first, we can now see it clearly. It's the ultimate revelation of his essence. Firstly, it's time to recap, and then we're going to deal with one last issue that goes beyond everything that we've known so far, Hashem's highest Atzmut. With everything that we've discussed in previous episodes, we've now resolved all of our theological issues. For example, there is no comparison between us and him, in the extreme, and we solved this problem by introducing the idea of metaphor and Nimshal, Mashal and Nimshal, with many high-caliber sources. 2, none of Hashem's dynamic actions imply any change in him, so that solves the unchangeability problem, because he's always being authentic, and every expression is a revelation of his essential, unchanging, single, unified will. As we've already seen, the Tzimtzum doesn't create anything new, it simply allows that same unchanging will to unfold in myriad worlds, Sefirot, souls, and expressions. 3, none of this implies any composition in him. Once we properly understand the deep wisdom and secrets of essence and expression. Essence is always one, and all the deep theology applies, even as he acts and expresses himself as he sees fit. And finally, his perfection, which we have defined as meaning that he is kol yachol, he can do anything on his own without any help, complete in his essence, and it also means that he expresses his perfection, meaning his expressions themselves are always flawless and perfect, without any deficiency or bad character or action whatsoever. With all this, there is nothing at all that implies that it's naive, childish, or in any way beneath him, not to mention theologically problematic. To say that he feels for us, is in a relationship with us, cares about us and our actions, that what we do touches and affects his unchanging essence, that the whole truth of his being is that he wants and needs us. This explanation is all there in our sources and explained by the Hasidus, and hopefully now we all understand it too. And I'll leave it to you, but through subtle and clear understanding, we can now see how this all neatly fits into most opinions of Torah Temet and answers all theological issues. But there is one point left, a very subtle point about an even higher level of Atzmus. I was actually recently asked by somebody what it means that all this talk about Atzmus is really just referring to what he called Atzmus Ein Sof. But that is not actually the ultimate, true and final level of Atzmus. So here's my answer. Firstly, I want to point out something. This isn't necessarily something that's universally agreed. I'll tell you what my own Rav of Hasidus, who's a very big, probably the biggest, according to people I've spoken to, Baal Hasidus in Manchester, says. Whenever we learn, and Atzmus comes up, I often raise this point with him. And he often tells me that what we're learning about right now is the highest. Whether it's Atzmus Ein Sof, Atzmus or Ein Sof. Let me tell you what he's getting at. Yes, in some contexts, Hasidus says Atzmus Ein Sof is not the highest level. But that doesn't mean that every single time the Rabbeim use that term, or even like I said, the term Atzmus or Ein Sof, which is supposedly even lower still, are not referring to the highest real level. Remember, Hasidus is a philosophical branch of Torah Lamdas, and philosophy isn't always mathematically logical. I know it has a branch called mathematical logic, but very often terms are used in multiple ways, and sometimes even a bit poetically, because not every treatise is a technical manual. Often the goal of the teaching is to convey and help the student understand a complicated idea. That's the goal, and thus using the terminology for Atzmus in a technical way isn't required. In fact, it will use the terminology loosely because it depends what the focus is. This is something I initially struggled with myself. When I first encountered Torah's teachings, the deepest Torah teachings, I thought they should be even more rigorous than mathematics, especially when the same terms are used in different ways and you understand, like, how does that all make sense? I struggle with that a lot. But eventually I realized what it is all about and I got comfortable with it. And also I want to point out that when it comes to Atzmus, using it loosely isn't just being frivolous or irresponsible. There's a reason for it. The theology of Atzmus itself applies in the same way to every level of Atzmus once you're talking about Atzmus. Once you're talking about Atzmus, you're talking about Atzmus, right? When you're discussing the differences between these extremely high levels of Atzmus, right? It's usually because you're trying to bring a very, very specific discussion on a very subtle point, on a topic that's beyond words anyway, right? So, anyway, I don't want to dwell on this point. I just want to point it out because I feel many people are intimidated when they hear this, and it causes them to still have difficulty letting go of the notion that Hashem is connected to us at the very top, and all the issues we're discussing here. So, let's continue by assuming that Atzmus Ein Sof is not the highest level, and there is an even higher level where even names and pronouns are inapplicable, and any discussion at all is impossible. I did touch on this briefly in my Lag BaOmer video, and I do plan to also make a more in-depth video about it. The level in question is referred to in the Zohar as Ilat al Kol Ilot, the cause above all causes. It is the highest madrega of Hashem, utterly beyond, completely non-relational, and completely out of reach. It is beyond names, beyond the word even you. We can't say you to him on that level, apparently. Beyond any concept at all. Beyond even the Orah Ein Sof, and beyond even the Atzmus Ein Sof, which itself is already in some way relevant to Giloi, in some way related to the structured chain of cause and effect that we've been describing until now. Hence the name cause above all causes, as opposed to the cause of all causes, which is sometimes applied to Ein Sof. Well, with everything we've been saying so far, we can actually begin to understand even this. Let's break it into 2 points, and leave the fuller discussion for another time. First, remember, when we try to ask what essence is, we've already gone wrong. That's not the kind of question you can ask about essence. It truly is ineffable, utterly beyond definition, as we've already shown above. In fact, we can take this even further. There's a strong argument to say that even using the word you, me, self, or even essence is already the beginning of revelation and relationship. It's already a step away from pure essence. Hasidus gives a beautiful mashal for this. You existed before you had a name. Being given a name changed nothing about who you are at all. Nothing at all. You were still you. You, once upon a time, didn't even know how to say the word I when referring to yourself, but you still fully existed as you are, fully and completely. So think about that deeply. You have a part of you that is also out of reach in a similar way. In fact, this is the deepest and truest you, totally beyond what? Just your very self, beyond any relation, any words, anything. And this is therefore a philosophical statement about essence, and true, of course, about Hashem, in a wondrous, exalted way, but is again not meant to detract from his personhood, as we will see. Now, let's deal with the second point. If this level of essence is truly that disconnected, that utterly beyond any form of existence we know, then how can actions arise from it? Surprisingly, the answer is actually easy to understand, although it's hard to explain, and harder still to say briefly. But this is a short video, so I'll do my best to explain it like this. Imagine I'm driving my wife to work. I'm driving her. I'm doing it because I desire to please her. My ratzon, my will, that's the real reason that we are sitting in the car together driving to work. However, when you look at the car, going down the road, with me and her in it, all you see is atoms. You see a vehicle, you see energy, you see bodies in a car, a steering wheel, you see stuff, you see movement, you see me taking her to work. What you don't see is my ratzon. But the truth is, my ratzon is the true reality of what's going on. The ultimate source that is the real root and cause, above all causes, of the ultimate reality of the entire picture, much more deep than what meets the eye. But ratzon is not part of the cause and effect of the world, right? There's no ratzon particle that creates a momentum in the world. This happens in some mysterious way. That ratzon, a purely spiritual makif, eventually becomes me driving my wife to work. There's a disconnect. There's no relationship between ratzon and physical matter. Matter has no way to touch ratzon, or feel it or grasp it. Nonetheless, the ratzon is the real source and cause above all the causes that are going on inside that car. And that's what we mean by there being an utter disconnect between Hashem and us. It doesn't mean chas v'shalom that he doesn't care, that he's disconnected, that he doesn't know about the world or anything like that, like the world means literally nothing to him, chas v'shalom. Chabad sources describe Ratzon Ha'elyon as the ultimate mover of all that happens, acting from above, rather than through the normal chain of cause and effect that is in the spiritual and the physical world. God's will is utterly transcendent, completely above understanding. Hashem's will is the true source of creation, but it's not in the same frame of existence. And indeed, his highest essence, the one we're talking about, is the true source of his will in exactly the same way, even though his essence and will are not in the same frame of existence, so to speak, either. There is no relation between them at all. Yet, as we learned above, they can still be described as identical. It means that we cannot fathom our connection to him, and really, we can't say that there is an actual cause and effect style of connection between us and him. Still, that does not mean what you might think it means, i.e. that we are not in a relationship with him himself, and I hope that's clear now. This is why, even by ilat al kol ha'ilot, the Zohar says he judges you, and the pasuk that proves this is, who can rescue from my hand? Indeed, once you truly understand what all of this means, you can even say something astonishing, that Hashem's ultimate, highest essence, he himself in his absolute oneness, has a hand. When you know what that really means, and if you've been following closely or thinking deeply, then you do, you'll see that this is not a contradiction to his oneness. It's not a paradox, and it's not even an approximation. It's simply the truth. He who is one truly has a hand. He is not composite. His hand is an expression, not him himself, but that does not mean it's not a real hand. It's the deepest truth of all. In the next episode, we're going to return to where we began, the question of whether Hashem truly feels, cares, and relates. And now, after all the theology, all the Kabbalah and Chassidus, we can say the answer. Not only does Hashem have a hand, not only does he love, it's the deepest, truest thing there is. And the Torah didn't exaggerate when it said so. And you can speak and think freely like the Torah speaks and encourages you to think. Stay tuned. Now we have everything we need. When we stop getting lost in the philosophy, in the categories, we begin to realize what it truly means that we were created in Hashem's image. It means we have our own version of Atzmus. And suddenly, all the philosophical objections we raised earlier, the ones that claim Hashem doesn't really love and he can't really feel or care, they actually apply to us too. But we don't say that about ourselves, so why should we say so about him? We too have levels within us, levels that correspond to all these Kabbalistic structures. There are levels within us beyond suffering, beyond change, beyond being affected. And yet we don't view ourselves as mechanical or unreal. Yes, it's fascinating to map all this out philosophically, but none of that changes the simple truth. We feel, we hurt, we love, we care, we know, we experience. And it's not some lower part of us doing all of that. It's the real, highest us, the deepest unchanging essence, the ineffable self, me. So why assume Hashem is any different? This is exactly why Rabbi Freeman often says, when you say Atzmus can't, think about it. What are you saying? This is a statement that really needs to be questioned, because you can't limit him. You have to separate out all the philosophy, the level called Atzmus, and reconnect back to him, beyond all levels, the who, beyond all the whats, right? The real difference between us and him is that his love is even more real, even more essential, even more infinite than ours. It's coming from his uncreated self, his mechuyev hametzias, even more infinite than ours. Our love is just a mashal for his, so much so that the Rambam doesn't even call it a metaphor. He calls it a homonym throughout part 1 of the Morim Nevuchim, and that is profound. Yes, of course, he is more real. He is eternal, like I said, mechuyev hametzias, and therefore, what is essential to him is objectively, ultimately essential. Torah and mitzvot, and you. If we think that our deep, very personal vulnerabilities are important to us, how much more so are his? They're eternal, they're never going to change, they're perfect and infinite. And now we can see how all of these phrases we often hear, like, it's just a mashal, or we can't understand, or it's only his expressions and not his essence, or we are nullified and nothing to him, or even, this applies only to one level and not the other. Things like that. They don't mean what people often assume. They don't mean that Hashem's actions or emotions aren't real, or that they're not authentic, or that they don't stem from his very essence, chas v'shalom. Quite the opposite. The Torah says it, the Rambam says it, the Zohar says it. They all speak about Hashem's hand, his love, his desire, and as we learned, even his need. All of it is true. All of it can be understood in a simple meaning. Let's now go back to Rav Hirsch's original example that sparked this entire discussion. Let's bring an example of how the Kabbalah, the most true and holy teachings of the Torah, truly explain it and how that fits with everything we've been saying. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, on the same passage in Bereshit 6:6, shows everything we've been saying. In his time, this truth was still considered a secret, not to be written down, but he does allude to it. And by the time of the Arizal, it became permitted to write it down. And by our time, we are even permitted to explain it clearly and in a down-to-earth, relatable, personal way, thanks to Chassidut. Here's what it means. In those pasukim of Hashem regretting in his heart, Hashem's holy name is used. And it's used here to imply that yes, we are indeed talking about his real heart, Zer Ampin, that is as it's known in Kabbalah, and precisely the heart of the heart, Tiferet, his attribute of Rachamim, compassion, with which this name is associated. So you can say it like this. In his deepest compassion, he saw all the suffering of his vulnerable, precious children, and because his heart feels his own unified will and need for us, his own vulnerable connection and compassion for us, shone in his true and ineffable regret in the unified infinite realm of his heart of Atzilut. And no, this does not imply any change in this essence. Why? Because we said, feelings don't change essence, not even in us. The unchanging essence of Hashem truly felt regret in his heart, and how can we not be moved by that? Rav Hirsch was right to insist that he prefers to take the Torah in the simple meaning. Without that, there is no feeling, there is no connection. And indeed, not taking it with feeling is the wrong thing to do. That's false, and it's very grave. So stay tuned for more. This video series has covered the essential points we set out to resolve. There is still more to explore though, separately, especially the differences between us and Hashem, which we didn't really cover here. And when it comes to understanding Hashem's Ratzon, and even his need for us, there are some deep and sophisticated discussions about omniscience, infinity, and divine choice. They all deserve their own careful treatment. But none of those are going to detract from the core message here. If anything, they're only going to deepen it, of course, because what else would you expect from him? He's amazing beyond all limit, right? This video was made to help you free up your heart and soul, to truly feel for Hashem, to come close to him, and to learn Torah as what it truly is, a love note from him to you, because it is his self in writing. Also, This video series I also hope has clarified why I talk this way in my videos. Here, we take every word of Torah and even every statement of Chazal in the simple meaning, like Ani l'dodiva alai teshukato, I am for my beloved and his need is upon me, or Nichmeru me'ai le'Ephraim, my innards churn with longing for Ephraim, or B'chol saratam lo asa, in all their troubles he is troubled. These are from the Torah, and also things like Ki'ilu kiviyachol nifchata lo even merasha. It's like a weight presses on him, so to speak. Or, like when the Rabbi said, Hashem needs us to console him. We take them all in their simple meaning. All of the many statements like these in the Torah and in Chazal, you're free now to take them in their simple meaning, with no extra clarification, qualification, or worry of heresy. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that it's so true, so real, so infinite, that you truly do not have the proper words to describe it. And this is the meaning of kaviyachol, so to speak, as we discussed in episode 3. Unless you are intellectually or philosophically curious, you should no longer need to worry about the theology of Atzmus. You should feel no hesitation, no internal resistance when speaking about Hashem. No need for disclaimers, no reflexive distancing or negation. Whether you're talking about Him, thinking about Him, or feeling about Him, you can just do it. You can soar close to Him, and you can help others do the same. You can explain to them and yourself the supreme importance of Torah mitzvot, not just for the world, but truly for Him. Shkoyah.